So Bailey, thank you for doing this. I super appreciate it. And
hmm
I'm super excited about the cover, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But before we do, tell me a little bit about your background. Why did you get into illustration, and what do you love about it?
my name is Bailey Vidler. I am a middle grade and picture book illustrator. I originally started in graphic design, but then ended up scooching into illustration because I realized that that was what I really loved. I have always, my entire life, been a reader, and then that involved into me being a writer, and I started writing my own stories, and then I started illustrating things to go with my stories, and I realized that that was my passion. And
How
that
old were you? How old were you when you like illustrated your first story?
that this would have been like, junior high, doodling
Fun.
on
So fun.
notebook paper in math
Yeah,
class.
exactly. Exactly, right?
Mhm. And then, got the degree in graphic design and then realized like, hmm, I would much rather be drawing dinosaurs than designing corporate manuals. So we pivoted to dinosaurs instead.
Yeah, that's really fun. That's really fun. Because who wouldn't? Who wouldn't rather be drawing dinosaurs?
Exactly.
That's so fun. So you do both middle grade books and picture books.
Mhm.
And so I want to talk to you more about that. But before I do, can you think of a middle grade book you love more than even just the illustration? Like, because you said you were always a reader. What are some middle
Mhm.
grade books that spoke to you?
So my all-time favorite middle grade book would be the Fablehaven series by Brandon Mull.
Yeah.
My he is in tatters because growing up I read it at least once a year. It went to swim meets, it went to sleepovers, it has been everywhere. It is hanging by a thread. But I just really inspired my love for like the fantastic and the magical. And then I would say also some other titles that come to mind are Kate DiCamillo's Because of Winn-Dixie and Tale of Despereaux. Um, just such good books. Again, I just love the whimsical nature.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah, it's beautiful.
so that's funny because Brandon Mull was one of the first authors I ever had a extended conversation with. It was many, many years ago. He had come
What?
to a book signing and my wife at that time, Jennifer, was coordinating a grant, a Gear Up grant for students to go to college. And she had
Mhm.
hosted this book event, and he came out to our little town, and he did like a bunch of book workshops and stuff. And so we really, it was before I had started writing, and I had a chance to visit with him, and he was so gracious and so
Uh-huh.
gracious with the students. So that's fun that Fablehaven and I would say in my top five favorite middle grade books is Because of Winn-Dixie and Kate
hmm
DiCamillo. I've had a chance she wouldn't know me, but to be at a book signing with her. She's such a lovely person,
hmm
and I appreciate fantasy and I read some of it, but my favorite gem is contemporary. Right. I think
hmm
there's something about that contemporary story. And she does both, right? Like you see Tale of
Yeah.
Despereaux and
hmm
others. She does both. But so that's fun that those are some of your favorites because I would definitely, those would be, those would be high on my list.
hmm
Absolutely. So when you, tell me a little bit about the creative process. So when someone brings you a story, right? How does that work? Do you have your own thing in mind, or do you read the story and then it just kind of comes, or how does that artistic process work for you with either picture books or middle grade with illustration?
hmm well, it kind of depends on if the author I'm working with already has a vision. Because if they have a vision, I want to respect that. If they, I've had authors that say like, "Hey, you know what? You kind of do your thing," and so that gives me a lot of freedom to explore and create. I consider my process to be very exploratory, so I sit down and I just doodle and I sketch and I try to come up with the craziest ideas I can. And a lot of times those crazy ideas are too crazy and get thrown out. But you can't, it's when you're digging through those crazy ideas that you find the gems. So like for Abby's big debate, I probably did, 4 pages of little tiny thumbnail sketches, um, trying to figure out like what's the most interesting way to depict this story. I also really like to make sure I write down like key points. Hey, what is super important to communicate about this book? And so that's how I try to convey like the essence of the book.
Yeah, well, that's I love that process of just kind of the brainstorming and the going through it. And I definitely knew. And we worked through a bunch of trying to find different illustrators.
Mhm,
And so we definitely had an idea of what we wanted it to look like, but I purposely didn't want to be prescriptive too much.
mhm,
You know what I mean?
mhm,
Because we also wanted to, because I have friends that do picture books. I also write picture books. I haven't had one illustrated yet, but I think there's real value in letting the words communicate to someone who that medium is their jam, right?
mhm,
Because instead of because sometimes even in my picture book critique group, they'll be like, and I want the illustrations like this, and I'll say like, don't do that. I'll like, let
mhm,
the words speak for themselves, and then let the other artist, the illustrator, because it will be a better product than you had imagined, right?
mhm.
If you and I totally feel that way about the cover of Abby's Big Debate.
Ooh,
Um,
I'm so glad to
you
hear
know,
that.
initially you sent us right the four ideas, and I sent them out to editors and to my critique group, and I said, which of these four do you like? And they were different concepts than I would have maybe done, and yet I'm super I'm thrilled about it, and just
Mhm,
I'll show you here in a second. I have a proof from the printer of the book, and I just had it out last night,
mhm,
and um, my wife said, she forgot she was even looking at it. She said, I had these two books side by side. And she said, Abby's Big Debate pops compared to the other one. She said, if I were at the bookstore, that it just pops. It pops right out.
mhm.
And so I'll show you the proof. You ready? Ta-da.
Woo!
Doesn't that look great?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so fun to when it's like finally in print.
And I'm sending you. Well, I won't have the actual print ones for a few weeks, but then I'll send you one because it really looks great, and it does pop. It just really is pop, and the
Mm-hmm.
color blends are fantastic, and so anyway, I can't. It's been hard not to want to show everybody, right? To be somewhat reserved about it, to try to, to capitalize on showing it, but because I want to be like, well, check this out, it's so great, and
Mm-hmm.
because I really have been excited about it. So I have just one other. You kind of answered it. Anything particularly you liked about this project? Anything that, as you were either illustrating or reading the book, that you were like, oh, this is really interesting, or this is an important thing for me about it, or I've asked you 12 questions, so I apologize.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, just a pause. Dog is barking. Still can't hear dog.
Can't hear, but dog is great.
Okay, okay. Okay. So what really struck me about Abby's Big Debate immediately is how it tackles difficult issues in such a really mature way. I think it's really easy to shy away from difficult topics. But I like how you didn't, how you took like really serious issues that, middle schoolers and high schoolers deal with that are uncomfortable to talk about and talked about them. It really reminds me immediately of like Judy Blume's writing, where again, she doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. And I think that's really important. That's brave.
Well, now you check is in the mail. That's amazing. What a nice thing for you to say. What a really lovely thing for you to say. And I appreciate that because it really is what we wanted to convey. I don't want to be critical of anyone else's work, but sometimes I read things and it feels like either middle schoolers are clueless that there's a world around them and it has
Hmm.
to be introduced to them, or that it's so heavy-handed, like, oh, look at this incredibly heavy thing that's happening to you. And I think most of us process the things that happen to us in our life more organically than that.
Hmm.
And so I that's what I really wanted from these characters who are dealing with, right, some really big things, and yet
Hmm.
they're able to deal with it, I think, in a way that is not only age appropriate, but is more organic of how things really come about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
And
it feels,
oh, please go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say it feels really authentic because, obviously I was a teenage girl once, and as I was reading through Abby's Dig Debate, I was like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like I remember similar scenarios. Like it just brought back stuff. I was like, yeah, I remember this.
Yeah.
It felt authentic.
Well, and then so you just answered my other question, which is obviously, right, when we write things to put them on a bookshelf, and we should, and I completely am sympathetic about that. And I am a huge fan of middle grade books and of contemporary middle grade books. But one of the challenges of that is I think sometimes we say, "Oh, those are for kids." You know what I mean? And I have found as an adult great satisfaction in reading really good middle grade reads because it does remind me of what I
Mhm,
went through and it helps me process what I'm going through as an adult. Right.
mhm.
And so you kind of articulated that and I appreciate that because I think it's really refreshing and they're
Mhm.
short.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, I've got a 3 hour commitment as opposed to, right, this is going to take me a week to get through. But
1,000 page book.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I appreciate that. I do, tell me where, so if anyone else watches this, where we can find more of your illustrations.
Mhm.
What's the best way to contact or reach out to you if someone has a project in mind?
Yeah, so my website is baileyvidler.com. That's spelled Bailey
And
Vidler.
I'll put a link to it as well.
Put a link. Okay. And so that's always the best way to contact me, because it goes straight to my email and I check my email frequently. That's where I post all my most recent illustrations. So if you want to see what I'm up to, any other books that are going up, I'm currently working on my own debut book right now, so I'm hoping to be posting stuff about that at some point.
And is it a
So
middle grade or chapter book? Or, I mean, a picture book.
it is a picture book.
Fun.
But middle grade's on my radar. I want to get there eventually.
So fun. Well, thank you. Anything else you want to add or say, Bailey?
Um, I don't think so. I'm just really excited for it to be out in the world.
Yeah, I am too, and I'm super excited for you, for people to get to know you, and I'm really couldn't be happier with the cover, and I'm excited for everyone to see the
Mhm.
cover, and as we get closer to everyone being able to actually hold the book in their hands, and so
Mhm.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. That was
Oh,
awesome.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you so much.